we'll figure out how to start here in just a second. Raquel, did you say take it take cheat? Is that what
Did
you
I
said?
say what the chips? Oh, chips,
Cheeps,
potato chips, potato.
Cheeps, those little yellow marshmallow
Yes. Oh,
Cheeps.
a lot of hey, a lot of friends here on this screen, and I love what JJ says. Maybe feeling a little bit like a backroom meeting, and we miss it terribly. We miss that sort of that opportunity to be together on a regular basis. But so really glad to be invited here, Raquel. When you and I spoke a while back about doing this, I knew that I wanted to pull Brian into the mix too, because I would say that besides my own sort of interpersonal deluge and disastrous way of dealing with resentments, Brian and I talk about God more than anything else in the that there is to talk about. Eh? We don't talk much about drinking, eh, brother?
No, man, no.
We talk about God, and we're not. We're not ashamed. It's an unabashed sort of approach to openness and open mindedness and understanding, which is wonderful. And I love Brian, and again, this conversation. I'm really hoping, Brian, it's just a conversation like we had on the bench last week. You know what I mean? At the park beside your house, and. So I don't even know where to start except to say that my name is Marty. I am an alcoholic, and I'm a member of the Prince George Group in Hamilton, Ontario. And this is...
I'm Brian. I am also an alcoholic and a member of the Prince George Group in Hamilton, Ontario. Best meeting in the country? On the planet? I don't know. I love it there.
Yeah. You got to think that about the group you belong to. We do this stuff when we were doing it all through Zoom. The backroom meeting was a replication, a 12-step experience, and a replication of what we call at our home group, the backroom. And so we got very close together for many years, talking about these 12 steps, and in the process began to enlarge and perfect our spiritual lives. We began to enlarge and investigate and perfect. I mean, I don't think there's any perfection involved. It's just we move towards perfection, and we've done it in a shared way. So I'm excited to sort of address some of that stuff. It's an interesting thing, really quickly, Brian. Is it? I don't know what's happening, but I was so off kilter for about a month, and I want people to know. I don't know if there's any new people here, but hang with us for a bit. We'll try to plug in some stuff there that might give you a little bit of hope too. But I was off the beam. I've gone through a little bit of stuff in that, but it didn't seem like it was that stuff. I was just full of self, and I was off the beam for a while and practicing and just staying with the disciplines and doing all the stuff that I do, but I didn't feel connected, And a couple of weeks ago, I got asked to speak about this relationship with the power. 3 times last weekend, I spoke about my relationship with the power. Here we are, and we're going to talk about God. I think I've been lit up by the idea that God is personal to me and is a powerful, powerful vestige in my life. There's nowhere else for me to go, and except that place, that spiritual place. So, and together, Brian, just as Raquel asked, we'll talk about how we got to that place, how we continue to go back to that place. So that's my introduction, buddy.
All right. I don't know. So I guess to start off, I think one of the things that really stands out for me is coming here. Coming to AA with absolute rejection of any kind of power, of any kind of idea of God, of any kind of religion, spiritual, all of it thrown out the window at a pretty early age, like after, probably what I would consider a somewhat of a religious upbringing, probably not as much as other people have experienced, more than what some people did, just kind of in the middle, I think, but I didn't want to do it. So that was an affront to me. And as soon as, my parents said, well, you decide if you want to keep doing this, when I was in my teens. And I said, well, absolutely not. I'll never darken the doorstep of the church again. and then just sort of manufactured and collected all this evidence of why I needn't believe and why it wasn't true. And it was great for my granny who needed God because she was going to meet him soon. But I became just increasingly disillusioned with it and got to the point where I was reading, I read the Bible so I could argue with you about the Bible drunk on a bar stool. Like that was, I read the Book of Mormon for the same reason. Like it wasn't enough for me to not believe. I needed you also to not believe. And then I, burn my life down and show up here. And then you read the steps on the wall and it's like, what?
Uh-oh.
I'm in trouble here. So,
Yeah.
but I don't think that, right? Like, I don't think I'm in trouble. I think, well, I'll figure out a way that'll work for me. I'll figure out, and I'll pick and choose, and I'll say, well, I could do this and I could do that. But I'm not doing these things, and I'm not interested in anything about God. And I expect to get results from that. I expect to get results from, picking and choosing, a couple of steps out of 12 and say, well, I'll do those because those are more palatable to me, and I won't do any of the rest. And I mean, I just kept getting drunk. Like it wasn't successful by any means, to take that attitude. And I spent a couple of years doing that, going in and out, getting drunk over and over again till I ran into somebody that was talking out of the book, talking out of the steps, and sort of ended up having like almost like an Ebby Thatcher experience, because it wasn't, I was convinced, as Bill was, that I was sunk. I was done at the end of those couple of years. And then this guy who has taken me on and has taken me through the steps and taken me through the book says to me, like, hey, do you have a power? And my answer was no, I don't. And he said, well, you're going to need something. So why don't you go home and see what you can figure out with that? And it was scary to me because he wasn't, he was a minister. So he wasn't just a guy. Like, he had credentials, he was, in my mind, it's like, oh, well, I better come up with something really good because it's going to have to pass this guy's, he's going to decide whether or not this is a good enough power. And he wasn't like a nice, United Church minister. He was a pound the pulpit, fire and brimstone kind of minister. And so I was like, well, this isn't, I don't know what to do. And he said, go home and see what you can come up with. And I did. And I try to share this as often as I can, because if you are struggling with the God thing, or you're working with people who struggle, this is what I went home and came up with was, I couldn't, it couldn't be anything from the past, so it had to be outside of my mind. Like so it came up, there's something, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to do the steps and see what happens. And, that was a sufficient power. I didn't think he was going to like it. And so I went back prepared to say, like, well, this is the best I could do. But he just asked me, he said, do you have a power? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, great. Let's do step 3. He didn't care. He didn't care. He enthusiastically assured me that I was on my way, because he knew what the hell he was talking about, which was fantastic, because I had no clue. So I don't know, like, I think that's, some people come in here with a belief and come in here with a faith, or maybe just come in here without an idea about it. They don't come in like hating it. But you can start from there,
And that's where it went with you. And I remember when all of that happened, it was like, and again, I remember I said something to somebody a while ago. Can't remember who I was speaking to. And I said something about experience. And he said to me, you know, Marty, your problem is that you think that your experience is the experience. And I started thinking about it. Again, the best learning in my life always comes through the veil of insults. You know what I mean? And I don't think the person was doing anything to try and hurt me, but he was right. I have this thing in recovery, and is that I discover something, or I have this revelatory experience, and I'm able to put words to it, and then I talk about it like none of you have ever experienced it, and I've been doing it for years. And I learned yesterday, and you guys should know all this too. And so that's the great, profound spiritual guy that I am. But I will say this: is that I know that every moment of my life has been an absolute spiritual gift. And I don't think I didn't always think like that. You know, when we talk about this development of a relationship, or this idea that grow into something, you know, I had a Roman Catholic upbringing. I was just a kid. I was small. I was driven to church every single Sunday. We had to get dressed up. We had to present well. We had to sit in the pew. We had to shut up. We had to get up, get down, get up, get down, get up, get down. You know, Catholicism is like very, very into fitness.
It's a lot of exercise.
A lot of exercise, man. On your knees, up, you're standing up, sitting down. So it was up and down, and I learned what to do. I learned all the rites of passage. I took all the rites of passage. I learned all the sayings. I learned how to say them back. A lot of those things are deep in my head, and I still hear those things echo today. But I remember, and I talk about this when I was 8 or 9 years old. There was a young girl in my class who had 9 brothers and sisters. It was 9 of them, and 2 parents. And she slept over at a friend's house, and the house caught fire, and the whole family was killed, and they were annihilated. And we were kids. And in our school, Catholics are great for this. They marched the whole class over to the funeral over at the church adjacent to the school. And when I walked in there, I swear to God, all I remember is looking first at all the caskets lined up and varied in size, all the way down to the smallest one. And then I looked up at the crucifix, and I thought, what kind of God would do that? And I'm 8 or 9. And I think, what a vengeful bastard, what a sadistic, you know, and these aren't words that I don't even know, but that's what's cropping up inside me. And I had hostility towards the church. That's how the last little while of going to church was with me. Fear and hostility was how I existed in the church. And one day, my old man, who was sitting at the table, I come from an alcoholic home, but a largely religious home filled with hypocrisy. My old man was sitting at the table having a Bloody Mary, and my mom was getting us ready and putting up a bit of a fuss. And she says, Jimmy. And Jimmy turns and says, what's the problem? I said, I don't want to go to church, Dad. And he said, well, you don't have to, God damn it. And he takes a drink, and my mom goes, Jimmy. And that was it. That was the last time I was ever at church. The rest of my life, some of it's documented, you know what I mean, in the press. It's like I'm living a life based on self. There's no doubt about it. But all the messages of a young man are in my head. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And you can sort this out. You can do this. You can be whatever you make your mind up to be. And then you introduce alcohol into my life, and I'm off and running. And I this thing about powerlessness, like, who knew that I was off and running with alcohol? Alcohol took me right away, and I was a loyal subject to King Alcohol. There's no doubt about it, from the time that I had my first drink until the time I had my last drink. But in the process there, you know, I spent a lot of time in prison, and there was always do-gooders coming in. I remember the Salvation Army at Christmas would always bring bags of chocolate bars and oranges and stuff. And I'd think, how kind is that? These are really generous people giving up their time and their lives in prison, you know, on Christmas to come and see prisoners. And then at 17, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous came in to me to carry a message. I talk about that sometimes. And I thought to myself, what a nice man. This was a man who mentioned God while he was talking to me. And I thought, there's a God guy. And in jail and in prison, there's always the Jesus jumpers. There's always the full gospel dudes. You know what I mean? That they're on fire for Jesus. And I stayed away from those guys because, you know, that's who was hanging on the cross. You know, I'm thinking, worship that? No, that ain't going to happen. And I had a life based on self. I was the manager of my life. There was no need for any other manager. Now, I was not doing a good job. But I was the manager. And the idea of another manager, you know, I'll go down swinging. You know, this thing about me and with surrender wasn't a conscious decision. I was brought to my knees, and on July the 16th, 1987, having a closed heart and a closed mind about any spiritual concepts or anything like that, not being able to connect to other human beings, I was closed off. I was pounded to my knees and I screamed out, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I heard a voice say, you don't have to. You don't have to live like this anymore. And boom, everything inside of me filled up with lightness. And I'm not talking about the light like Bill Wilson's light. I'm talking Marty Mann's light. I was heavy and dark my whole life. My whole life. I had weight on me that held me down. And it was gone. And when I stood up, I felt that lightness and knew that something powerful, something magnificent had just happened. I knew, and all that hatred and rage, the obsession to drink, all that stuff was removed from me on that day, July 16th, 1987. It was gone. I was touched by the powerful hand of God. There was no flimsy reed. I found out later what the flimsy reed was. There was no flimsy reed. I had this powerful barn-burning experience. And I set about my life in a sober world, with all the management at the behest, that I always thought that as long as I was trying not to sin in my childhood understanding of what right and wrong was, as long as I was trying not to sin, I was in good stead. And my story. I've been Alcoholics Anonymous for 14 years. I'm having this largely secular experience. I'm going to sweetgrass ceremonies and sweat ceremonies, and I'm running through the woods naked, and I'm going to all kinds of Catholic sort of ceremonies, and I'm feeling this sort of something happening. But my life is driven by me. That's it. There's no, this relationship with a power I know nothing about. Nothing. So what, and you guys know my experience with Mark. And for the first time, I was asked some questions that had never been asked before, and do you now believe? Are you willing to believe? And I said, I know that there's something. And I had to, because how could I reject, resent, or have hostility towards a God that didn't exist? I knew there was something there. It was always with me. But when I had there's a later proclamation put in front of me is that God is either everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is your choice? I started to weep, and I began to understand that I was about to make a cognitive decision to accept power. That's what happened to me. And there was no reason. I didn't know this man. I had no experience with him. I had no experience. I was up in a hotel room with a stranger, and those words, they were not coming from him. And like Brian, we said a third step prayer. And for the first time in my life, I felt that same experience I had July the 16th, 1987. It was 14 years later, and I felt the lightness come up inside of me again. And when I stood up, I knew I was a changed man again. 14 years in between, understanding wholly that there's no time frame in between in the spiritual world. There's no time. It could have been 14 minutes. It wouldn't matter. This is exactly what happened to me. So, I'll come back to it in a second, but it's now it turned into seeking for me. It turned into seeking more understanding, more knowledge, and more communication and connection with this power. That's what I began to seek. And I'll talk more about that in a second, how that starts to reveal itself, because I want to hear more about what happened to Brian when he started making these connections.
Even though I really rejected these ideas from, my past, from my upbringing, it's exactly what I went to, even when I got here, even after having that experience. So, coming into the third step with my sponsor, with this idea that there's something, I really didn't have any kind of clue what it might be. But you start to get introduced to these prayers, the third step prayer, 7-step prayer, 11-step prayer. And I start to try to use those prayers. I try to I'm going to apply these prayers, and I put together these when I wake up in the morning, I say the third step and the 7th step prayers. And then before I go to bed, I say this prayer and I say that prayer. And I have what I think is a pretty intellectual experience with the prayers, as if there's something that if I do them, the correct number of times, or I to do them in the right cadence, or I do them in the, if I have a certain feeling then that's what I'm going for. And I don't really understand yet, like what's going to happen, like what happens later, because I'm kind of in this world of like, I'm not really sure. I don't really have any evidence. I have this desperate desire because I don't want to die. But I don't have much else, and I'm working through the steps. I'm doing inventory. I'm sharing it. I go to God, but it's 6 and 7 the first time. There's not a lot. It's just checking a box, But I move into 8 and 9, and that's where I start to have where it starts to, there's something, and I don't know what it is, to like, there's something. I still don't know what it is, but, I start to have a very powerful conviction, because now I'm doing things that I didn't believe that I could ever do. Facing these situations, talking to people that I've wronged and setting these things right. Like some of them were terrifying to me. And it was through that process where I started to feel like, oh, there's actually something going on here. And then I had a suddenly experience, like you talk about being filled up with light. I didn't have it that way, but I still had suddenly I realized that, something was happening. God was doing something for me I couldn't do for myself. But it freaked me out, because I was like, I'm not waking up with a sense of impending doom every morning. I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop all the time. Like, things are actually kind of going okay. And it freaks me out, because that's not how my life has been. And I call my sponsor to say, like, I don't know what this means. Like, I don't know what's happening. And he starts laughing, and he said, like, what the hell do you think we've been trying to do? Like, you're having a spiritual experience. You are awakening, and you don't even recognize it. And he goes, by the way, when was the last time you thought of a drink? And it was months, it had been months and months where I hadn't had the thought of a drink. And I was blown away by that. Like, this was happening to me. I had no clue what was going on, other than just this, just being obedient to this guy that I really didn't understand at all what I was trying to accomplish. What I was trying to accomplish was not dying. Like, that was my main concern at that time, and I start to have this, in spite of my own ignorance, in spite of my own attempts to control outcomes, like kind of this idea of God as a pinch hitter, or Santa Claus, or something I can control through the right sequences, the right, that I have something to do with that. In spite of all that, by being obedient to this work, I start to get taken to a place where I start to experience some real freedom, and get introduced to 10 and 11 as the mechanism of spiritual growth, and the mechanism that I'm just going to live the rest of my life in this place. He introduces me to that, because I was sort of getting confused, and I was thinking, well, what is God's will for me, and how will I know if I'm doing it? And if I'm not doing it, then I'm going to be getting into all kinds of trouble. So maybe I shouldn't do anything unless I'm absolutely certain that this is God's will for me. And I was sort of getting into this like paralysis by analysis kind of situation with the whole thing. And I didn't know what to do. And so I talked to my sponsor, and he says, well, here's what we do. And he took me to steps 10 and 11. And he said, this is what we do. You're not going to get an itinerary for the day. God's not going to slip it under your door. Your job is to pray and to watch and to seek and to grow in understanding and effectiveness, and it's going to take some time. And then he also said, get out there and start working with guys at that same time too. But the sort of growth towards God was very, I don't know, just that idea of like Santa Claus, or that idea of like some kind of a transactional nature to the whole thing. If I do these things, then I get those things, which is, changed a lot. But I'll stop there. And Marty, you can, if you want to talk about something, and I can talk. Well, no, let me share one last thing, because this happened last night. I'm at a meeting, and we're talking about step 7, the step room. they read step 7. My sponsor's running it. He shares on step 7, and then it goes around the room, and everybody's talking about how it sounds like they're in control, like I have to, every morning I ask God to remove these things, and it's up to me to handle these things, and it's up to me to and it's very a little disconcerting, that the 7th step, which to me is like one of the most powerful demonstrations of my own absolute powerlessness and the total unmanageability, the total desperation of my life is sort of brought clear to me in 7, to go to God and say, like, hey, I'm so screwed. Look at all this stuff that I've written down in black and white, and I can't do anything about it. And please remove this from me, as part of a series of steps. Like, this is a set of actions that I'm taking. It's not like some kind of an incantation that I must use every morning in order to somehow, relieve myself of my defects of character. It's not really how it works, I don't think.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, we concur on a lot of things, and we negotiated on a lot of things. Like, I'm at Fox, and as we were coming along through this stuff, we start sharing readings, we start sharing sort of concepts of spirituality and these kinds of things. So I begin to sort of develop this sort of head knowledge about this God of my understanding. I'm trying to have an understanding of this power of this God. And I grow in that. I grow into that. I when I'm going to conferences or roundups or workshops or anything like that, that's what I'm leaning into. I'm wanting more. I want to feel more, and I'm never really understanding that the God that I seek is already here. I'm never really understanding that it's self and all its limitations. And self itself, the entity of self, and Deb and I were just at a meeting when Curdy was there, and Curdy was saying, he said something, he said, I didn't know self could be removed and that I didn't need to manage. I didn't know that. Now you think about the profound statement there. I didn't know that self could be removed. When it says we faced a self-imposed crisis. Self-imposed crisis. It's not a circumstance-imposed crisis. It's nothing like to do. It's self-imposed. Self is an entity in and of itself. Itself is an entity in and of itself. And so here I am. I don't even know that I need to be rid of it. I think I am the self. And so all through my sobriety and all through myself is taking the steps. Myself is having a self and ego driven experience with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the more information I get, the more self feels the power. And the more I begin to use these steps as management tools in my life, and although it's much more effective than what I used to do with it, it's more effective. It causes harm in the long run because it increases the separation and the disconnection from the power. And it certainly reinforces the lack of a need for that connection to the power. I know theoretically I need the power, but sometimes I don't know I need the connection to the power. And it reveals itself in the most brilliant and tactical and obscure ways, because I think I can go right for it. Taught through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact. I think that I'm going to go, Lord, please help me with this and that. And then thank you for this beautiful life I have. And then I think there's going to be some sort of profound things that I'm going to say and do that are going to get me closer to this God. And anybody who's on this page, I'm not saying don't do that shit. That's actually a really important way to live your life, is through these disciplines. But I think that as a result of living my life through these disciplines, as a result of having had a spiritual awakening, as a result of these things, these disciplines, as a result of attempting to live by spiritual principles, when the shit hits the fan, he delivers. Now, I don't see it coming. I was saying earlier, I got through a lot this last few months, But I'm not going to bitch and moan and whine about it, because you need to know I'm a pretty happy dude. I'm a pretty happy guy. But circumstances have put me in a place where the need for a God is much more obvious to me. And so I'm sitting with my friend, and don't take this personally when you hear this. I'm sitting with my friend a month ago, and he says, Marty, what if it's all God? And he's on here right now, actually. He said, what if it's all God? And I thought, yeah, God is everything or God is nothing. What if it's all God? That was just the question. So if you know me, you know I went with that. That means that punching someone in the face is also God. I used to think that self was responsible for the punching people in the face. So now I'm thinking, wait a minute. If it's all God, I need to go and punch some more people in the face. So I come up with a plan, and I'm not making a joke here. I come up with a plan. It's on a Friday, and then all day Saturday, I'm working out the plan, and I go to meet these guys. We're smashing some chicken wings, and we're talking recovery and love, and I'm sharing my plan about going down to Delhi, Ontario, and smash a couple people in the face. And this guy says to me, he says, Marty, have you talked to Brian? I said, no. I'm not talking to Brian. Going to be too much God on that front. I'm not talking to Brian. I like the God that I've come up with these last 48 hours, that God is everything. God, what if it's all God? And so I go and I sit down with Brian. It's 10 minutes. And I'm going to be frank here, Raquel. I apologize in advance. I'm going to be frank. And if anybody I insult you, get my email, message me, tell me whatever. But this is what happened. I sat down with Brian and I told him what I was going to do. I told him my plan and I outed myself. And this is what we have to do spiritually. You have to out yourself. I had no idea how far off the beam I was. I was trying to come up with my own beam, which punching in the face family members was an acceptable way to live spiritually. And out of the blue, Brian says, are you talking about such and such and such and such? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, fuck him. Poof. Poof. I went, oh my God. I didn't know that was available to me. I thought I had to manage this situation. And I was only going to manage guys. It's funny now, but it was not funny at the time. And Brian, I'll tell you that this was going on for a couple of weeks. It was how I was going to manage it. That happened at 5 to 12 p.m. last Sunday afternoon. I was free at noon. I sent them a loving message and said, I'm not coming down today, guys. Don't worry about it. Enjoy the rest of the day. Love you. See you later. And I went and had a hell of a good day. A hell of a good day. And I got on my knees and I said, thank you. Thank you for showing up again. And sometimes out of the mouths of idiots comes some of the most profound advice anyone could ever get. Thank you for Brian, that idiot. Thank you. And thank you for Dave for suggesting I go talk to him. And thank you for the people you put. And that talk I gave a little while ago, and some of you were there, is like that flimsy reed idea, is that what first seemed to be a flimsy reed turns out to be the loving, powerful hand of God. For me, the fellowship was a flimsy reed. I was hanging on to it, but it's not going to sustain me until I get close enough to something that can pull me all the way to shore. And that simple phrase pulled me to shore. Who knew I could be free? I was, guys, all through the disciplines, getting on my knees at night, sharing with people, talking about this stuff, and it wasn't going anywhere. But the moment that the pain and the anguish of being me, the moment it was on me so badly that I was going to act out in maniacal ways, God shows up again and says, fuck him. And maybe your God doesn't swear. Maybe he's perfect or whatever. But that set me free. Now, how does that work? Unless deep down inside me, God's right there waiting to hear that. To warm me up and to say to me, I'm with you. I've always been with you. I've always been with you. And then I look back and think about how I healed from the death of my daughter. And I think that's magic. That's powerful, powerful stuff. That's not for the meek. And I've been saying this since we were doing the back room on here, is that I have believed in this power with a fervence and a strength and a commitment. And we talk about developing that relationship. You look at that kid who's terrified and angry and hostile towards this God, to this place of absolute reliance. Do you believe in God, Marty? Nope. I rely on God because I'm not right. And if all you guys are okay,
and you just added Alcoholics Anonymous to your itinerary of life living, I'm not okay. I need to stay in this. Bri, I need to stay in this. Bri sees me. Sometimes I'm carrying a spiritual message and I'm losing it. Anyway, it's like these things are revealed. These things are revealed. And every single time they're revealed, my connection grows. I can't live on the bread of yesterday. I cannot. These revelatory experiences that have occurred in my life continuously prove to me that God is a powerful and loving hand. But guess whose hand it is? I said it the other night. Guess whose hand it is? I don't even know if God has hands. Guess it's what hand? There's the hand. It's your hand. Deb, Raquel, all you guys who used to come to the backroom meeting, all that stuff going through with Sarah, it was your hand that kept pulling me to shore. Your hand that kept filling me up with the light, the power. And I always say this. I'm never closer to the God of my understanding as when I'm with another alcoholic talking about these spiritual principles. Never. I see, feel, experience God when I'm with you. Less anywhere else. More when I'm with you. That's a pretty accurate assessment, eh, Brett?
I love that story. It replaces a previous story like that I love.
One of these days I'm going to get well and there'll be no more stories.
Oh, God, don't do that. What do we talk about?
I'll sit there. I'll have no more stories.
What do we talk about? I love that because you're 38 years sober and you are a lunatic. And so am I. And so is everybody else that's on this call. There's nowhere to get to. We don't arrive. We never arrive. We never are at a place where I am now impervious to life. I am impervious to my selfishness and self-centeredness. I'm impervious to myself. It's everything just is fine and there's no problem. That's beautiful to me because we all suffer. And if you think, and I've had this experience where I get to a point in AA where I feel like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I'm telling myself, I'm not doing a 10-step. I'm not talking to God. I'm talking to the little God I've made in my head that, oh, you know better than that. You're not supposed to be resentful. You're not supposed to be fearful. You need to just turn that over to God, and you don't talk to anybody about it because that's embarrassing. Like that you're, whatever years of sobriety you are, and you should know better and you should be doing better than that. And so you stay quiet and you don't talk to anybody. And then you burn your life to the ground because your selfishness and self-centeredness ramps up. And it comes from just telling you a story about something that's going on, till you start making some decisions about what needs to happen, till you start going out into the world and creating some wreckage and creating some damage and harming people in your life as a result of that, and I've, been to the point where I wanted to check out based on those very thoughts, just being completely consumed with selfishness and self-centeredness. And it's so, I think it's so, I want to hear that, I want to hear that a guy with time, a guy that I really look up to, who's done so much around here for so many people, shown so many men to the message, that you're just the same. We're all the same, and we all need this. And there isn't anything transactional about it. There isn't anything where I get taken to this place where I'm good. I never get there. And I can't think that way, I can't think that way. But I think exactly what needed to happen is what happened, right? That was a 10th step drawn out over about a month. But a 10th step nonetheless, and resulted in what it needed to result in. It wasn't When you said I'm off the beam, so I'm making my own beam. You're not off the beam if you have made your own beam to be on. That's lunacy. I think at this point, like I don't think about this as much more than obedience. Like you've shared this story probably where you talk about your experience of sort of transforming what you think God is about. And I love it. It's like, oh, God is all about love, because you're at this point in your life where you have a daughter and you're full of love and light, and you read the Velveteen Rabbit, and which I cried when I read, by the way. And then it's all about God. And then you come to a place of, no, it's all about obedience. I was lucky. I don't know. I was lucky to get started in that place. That the guy I was working with made it pretty clear to me that that's what it was about. It took me a while to really get there, though, to really get to the place where the obedience is like, it's a visceral, like it's a real thing. It's a thing that I do. Like there's work to do. There's actions to be taken. And not anything special, like just the stuff that's described in the book, like the step 10. Like I had a real transformational experience, and largely because of being in the room with you, I think, Marty, and just hearing you talk about it over and over and over again. But I always kind of held it as this, like, if something really bad happened, then I sort of trot out the 10th to deal with the really bad thing, and that was kind of how I went about it. But what changed, I don't know, 6 years ago, it's hard to tell with the pandemic, it messed up time, but was that I just started to do it all the time. And it didn't matter what the size of the thing was. The content is sort of irrelevant. It's my relationship to the thing. If I'm in fear, if I'm in anger, it doesn't matter if it's something tragic. Or if it's something very inconsequential, that I have a disagreement with my boss at work, or I have, someone I love tries to take their life. Like those are not any different other in terms of their content and how I relate to it. Like the severity of it is kind of irrelevant, because if I get cut off, I get cut off. And so this idea that it's actually for all of those things. And if I just keep practicing it that way, I seem to not accumulate. I've been thinking lately, like it's like either, if you sweep out your house every day versus sweeping out your house once a year, or if I think of all my little, selfish and resentments and fear as snowflakes, eventually those will turn into a snowbank, and that'll be a lot harder to get rid of than if I just go out and, sort of clear off my walk with a broom every day. But I don't also, what I think that turns into or doesn't turn into is that I no longer have to change jobs every 6 months because I hate the people I work with, even though I was convinced that I would love these people when I took the job, or that I'm so horribly unhappy in my relationship that I need a different one, or I'm so uncomfortable in my home group that I have to change home groups, or I'm so pissed off at my sponsor that I have to change sponsors, or I'm so, I don't find that stuff is happening with the frequency that it used to happen to me. And it would go all the way to action. It wouldn't just be like, oh, I'm having these thoughts. It's like, no, I'm quitting my job. Like, and it's not a good idea, but I've become so uncomfortable in my own skin. I can't, it needs treatment. And so treatment is a job change. Alcoholism, powerlessness, unmanageability demands treatment. And so I'll treat it with calamity. But that daily action, that daily, many times a day, going back to God, that recovery, it's a recovery practice, right? I'm bringing my mind back to God in the same way I would with the meditation, right? If I'm trying to meditate, everybody think, oh, I can't meditate, my mind's crazy. It's like, yeah, everybody's mind is crazy. That's not what meditation is. Meditation is returning to the breath. Your mind goes crazy, you return to the breath. Your mind goes crazy, you return to the breath. Well, 10th step is the same thing, right? It's a recovery practice of my mind's going crazy. I'm coming back to God. I'm coming back to now. I'm coming back to here. And then my mind goes crazy. And then I'm coming back to here. I'm coming back to now. I'm coming back to God. And so that practice has been unbelievable. That has been unbelievable to me, that engine, and it's not reliant on my perfection. It's not reliant on my understanding. I don't need to know why I feel that way. I don't need to solve it. I don't call Marty up in a 10 step and say, okay, buddy, we need to psychoanalyze this fear that I'm having. I think it's to do with my childhood, but I can't quite work out if it was my dad or my mom. Can you help me? No, it's like, hey, I'm having this fear. And okay, see you later. Go help somebody. And then I get free again and again and again and again. And it's like, that's at this point anyway, like to me, that's what kind of my relationship with God comes from my obedience to that stuff. And he shows up there, right? Like the consciousness of the presence of God is the important fact of my life, but I don't experience the consciousness of the presence of God outside of that stuff. It's like if I'm not living inside of that framework, if I'm not living inside of those disciplines, then I don't seem to have the consciousness and presence of God. But it's not like it's not like I can bring it about through my willpower. It's by really just giving up to those things and say, well, if I'm going to take a position here, then it means I have to do all those things, or I haven't really taken the position, and I don't want to. I never want to not do that, I guess. I don't know. I feel like I'm losing the thread a little bit here, but.
And you tend to do that, and I like that, because when we have these elongated conversations about this power, it's like we're talking Merton and DeMello and again Emmett Fox. We're talking about sort of concepts and spiritual concepts. Living this life underneath that knowledge can sometimes be extremely limited, But it's like I don't have any awakenings before. I don't have any sort of awakenings before the anguish. You know what I mean? It's like the anguish has to come. And then I turn. And then everything, like the spiritual connotation of the word turn. We're talking about July the 16th, 1987, I got sober. I heard and felt the power and the presence of this God that I now know. But how do I know? Because the God exists between you and I, and see it all the time at meetings or desperate circumstances, or the detox, or holding someone's hand at the hospital, or all those guys that we saw die and loving them right into their grave. And I know that this God and this power is deep inside of me and can be revealed very, very quickly. But I also know that self, manifested in various ways, can always come on top of that stuff and look very spiritual. And arrogance and egocentricity is things that I will deny right up until I crash headlong into a tree and realize that that's what's been dogging me every step of the way. What I know, what I think I know, And here, as I say, July 16th, 85, and I go right to, or 87, and I go right to today, and I think, all right, well, here we are today. How is this? What Raquel asked us to come and have a conversation about how we develop this relationship with God. And I hope that everybody would see that it's not a straight line. It's up, down, all around, left, right. It's all over the place. And then I look back, and this is what we say. I mean, Bob says it, you live life forward, we look backwards, or whatever he says. We look back and we say, holy shit. I mean, God has been there the whole way. And Ralphie says, well, what if it's all God? And it's kind of like, yeah, I can see that on this side of it, but you saw what I did with that in front of it. It's like on this side of it, I can look back and go, oh my God, it's all God. And I could be enriched with that, and I could love you. And if we were all in the same room together right now, I'd be laughing with you and spitting all over you and hugging you, and in joyousness and joyous contemplation of this power that presides over us all. But you give me that in front of it, God's got this.
Just pisses you off.
Yeah, well, if it's all God, then I look at all those mistakes I made, and I'm going to make more. I'll just keep making them. And then I'm going to look back and go, oh, there he is. And that's so ridiculous. And this whole idea of non-dualism, this whole idea of right, wrong, and when it talks right here about this, is we're going to talk about God. We've written a book that's moral and spiritual. This morality piece, good, bad, right, wrong, that stuff is tucked really deep inside me. It's deep inside me, and I view life through that lens, and I want to stop. I want to view life through the lens of the power that exists inside of me, which is to not have a position, to be placed in a position of neutrality, to go through life understanding that your struggles, albeit very painful and awful to you, I will always offer my assistance and love around that. But I can't solve it for you. I don't even judge it as good or bad. I don't even look at that and say, oh my God, isn't it terrible you're suffering? Because I don't know anymore. This position of neutrality, step 10, I've always, and I didn't even know why I said it. Now I know, I'm starting to know why I said it offers all the secrets to good living. You remember that, Brian? How long I've been saying that? Stops all over the world. That was 10 steps, the greatest gift in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no idea why until it all came to fruition. And it's like, who knew? Who knew that if I sincerely take such a position in step 3, and then I look at this position of neutrality in step 10, they're directly connected because of what happened in between. And what happened in between was living life. I highly suggest that to all of you. Live life. Get into relationships, good ones and bad ones. Get out of them as quickly as possible if you have to. But get jobs, lose jobs. Do the things you need to do to live life. Have children and love your children. Do the things you need to do to experience life. Because I can't imagine that any God that has come to be known to me would want me to be any less than a passionate and loving person that I am. Because my heart gets so full sometimes, it feels like it's going to explode. And when you're sitting here with me like this, and my arms are flailing and I'm spitting and everything like that, it's because of that. It's because of that. It's because we have been so blessed to be able to come together and talk about these things, Raquel. Like, I'm so blessed. I know you're exhausted, love, but this is such a good opportunity for Brian and I to reconcile some of our kinship. We always love talking about this stuff. We've always had fundamental disagreements about the program, brother? And
about 2 days worth.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, when we get up and we're doing this stuff in a sort of meeting forum, the love that's there is what drives this. And I've always thought anonymity was love, but anonymity, the one without a name, is also like this love, this God. There's a strong connection between that. I can't speak of God with any sort of and not feel love.
I have felt, I'm sorry, I know you think that this is not my time to speak, but I will. Because this format I have felt that I need to ask you both a very important question. First to you, Marty, because I'm thinking that to go through, and it's okay to have a very personal question. I know you're going to roll with it. To be thinking of losing a child, I cannot think of something more painful and more scary, right? And I know you talk now to all of us on how everything was like this. I would love to have seen you in the times that it was not like that it was heavy. Up until those times, because I know that you stay the course, and I think this is what we do, right? We stay the course, and then when we're so full of everything, God comes and pops that, and the pocket is all that is needed, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're in those moments, I mean, we're talking about serious pain over here. We're talking about something that cannot be just fathomed. This is something that I need to know. Like, how was it? It's very nice to hear you say, God, remove your pain. Talk to me about that time that you were just in so much pain that you didn't know how you were going to stay the course and how you were really going to go to the other side. That's what I want to know. Your reliance on God. You know what I'm saying? And then I'll ask a question to Brian. I had to intervene, sorry, but there's no format here. That's how we do it.
We're here and out. We're almost an hour in. It's like, absolutely, Raquel. And I'll try to do this very, very quickly. And some of you have been along with me for the ride. I was speaking immediately after and even during. Now, I want to be clear about something here. Is when we come together on these Zoom meetings, and some of us have been sober a long time, and we spend time together. And we share and we offer up ideas, thoughts, and experiences. So I want to just refer to Sandy. So I'm a big fan of Sandy and had a friendship with him, and that evolved over time, and then sat down for dinner with him and had the conversation about the loss of his daughter. And just like you just asked me, Raquel, I had no concept of how anybody could deal with that. And what he referred to was all the experiences he had witnessed in his sobriety up to that point of the power of God healing people. He was witness to it, but he couldn't conceive of it either until it happened. So what happened to me, and this was a devastating loss, and so many of you have been with me for the ride with Sarah and her antics and her activities all these years. And when she went, we got the news. I got up there and I was able to sort of stay with her for a couple of days and hold her hand and to try to generate some sort of a closeness and something, right? And I told this story last week. There was a Catholic priest. My daughter asked if we could give her the last rites, and this Catholic, and I had been talking to Sarah for 2 days through tears, through anger, through pain. I was talking to Sarah at her bedside, and the priest comes and he gets ready to come in and do the last rites, and he said to put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Have you been talking to her?" And I said, yeah, I have, a lot actually. He says, "Well, the soul has ears." Now, I don't know why the words of people sounds so much to me like the voice of God. But the results of the words is where God shows up. Because all of a sudden I changed. And when I walked into the room, it felt different. I knew that the last couple of days that I thought she couldn't hear a word I was saying, that she had heard everything. And if the soul has ears, I want her to know that I love her and that her soul is what I love. I've always loved her soul, and that's what I love. So the soul had ears. Now, we came home, and for 2 weeks, I sat in an armchair, cracked. I've never felt pain like that. I've never been broken. And my friend Brian would attest to this. And you say you wish you could see it through the process, but Alcoholics Anonymous members kept showing up, and I was cracked. The date got set. We had the service, and there was people coming in and out. I didn't know what to do except just to make the arrangements and go through the motions, and I wasn't feeling attached to anything. And you were right. I was in constant dialogue with God in my head and my heart. But when the day came, we got over to the funeral home and people started showing up. And then they kept showing up. And they kept showing up. And the room began to fill with fellowship. And I began to harness what the anonymous love of Alcoholics Anonymous that I was talking about earlier. I began to harness that. And Brian sang Tom Petty's Wildflowers at the service to bring us into the service. Brian, right here. A beautiful rendition of that song, Wildflowers. And the room was full. It was packed. And at 2:00 in the afternoon, when the service happened, I cracked again. And my granddaughter got at my feet and she held my hand. She had never seen me like that before. And I just sobbed with my granddaughter in my arms. And at 3:00 in the afternoon, the service ended. We walked people out, said goodbye to a lot of people. At 4:00 in the afternoon, I was starting to feel a little less heavy. We took a break and came back, and all my childhood friends showed up. Everybody started showing up at the hall. This is 2 weeks later. At 7:00 that night, I knew I was okay. At 8:00 that night, we were all gathered telling funny stories about Sarah. At 9:00 that night, we were cleaning up and eating some of the leftover food. And 11:00 at night, we were closing down the whole thing, and I came home and I was okay. And the next morning, I jumped on a plane. I flew out to British Columbia, and I took at 4:00 in the morning, and I took 40 men through the steps out in the bush. And I came back from that a different man than I was 2 weeks ago. I could sit here and I could tell you that there was, but it's the change. You know, Nicodemus asked Mary Magdalene. She said, "What happened? What happened to you?" And she said, "I don't know, but one day I was one way, and the next I was another." July the 16th, 1987, I had no vision of my life changing. I dropped to my knees and screamed out for help. And one day I was one way and the next I was another. At 14 years sober, when I was the closing speaker at a conference, and Mark Houston was the banquet speaker, and he said to me, "You're asleep dreaming you're awake." One day I was one way and the next I was another. I sat down on a bench with Brian a week ago, just last Sunday, and when I went to him, I was one way, and 15 minutes later, I was another. And there's no time in the spiritual world, Raquel. I still grieve my daughter. She was a beauty. But I'm okay. And when I sat and had dinner with Sandy Beach, he said, "Marty, I grieve her every day. I grieve her every day. But I'm not bound by my sadness anymore. There's joyousness around it, and there's joyousness around my relationship with Sarah now. And my wife was just here in the room and heard you ask me that question, and she stayed here for as long as she could, and she walked away crying. And I will leave this venue here, and I will go up and I'll put my arms around Leslie, and we'll cry, and it'll be okay. It'll be okay. And why? Because you guys, because of the power of this. And if I don't think there's anybody new who, but if you are, understand what we're talking about here. We're talking about the magnificent. This is not about not drinking. Holy shit. And so I turn around and I look at my life and I go, how blessed am I? How blessed, Raquel, thanks for asking the question. But the demonstration of this stuff is exactly that. We can talk about this stuff all the live long day. Talk about, oh, God, this, God, that. No wonder newcomers get deterred by spiritual terms when they're shoving shit down their throat, But if we walk like we believe it, if we live away and walk like we believe it and share shit like this openly and honestly, the struggles, and then because you can share the struggles and then God comes in and goes, okay, enough, you tool. Here I am. Tell people about me. Quit bitching and moaning and whining and tell people about me. And that's how I love you, buddy. Thanks for asking.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't do something I shouldn't have. I'm just gonna ask a last question. If you need to go hug your wife, we totally understand that.
With you, it's anonymous.
Yeah, we're gonna finish this. Brian, you talked about obedience and the fear of losing the thread. Right. And this is something I struggle with a lot, that I feel if I don't stay on these disciplines, then I'm going to lose the connection. However, evidence proves me otherwise. Evidence proves to me that, like what my sponsor says, all is grace, right? And sometimes all we need to do is just come to the point to say to God, I can't do this anymore. That's more than enough. Right. So when you were talking about this idea of discipline, is it that strong even for you today? Like, if I don't do this, then I won't have that connection.
She asks tough questions, Bray.
No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. She's good though. She's good. I
think the way I think about it now, or what sort of comes to mind, is not I have no doubts of God, but I think I'm not punished for my sins, but I'm punished by my sins. So I suffer the distance, I suffer the space that I'm putting in there through, self manifesting in various ways, block me from experiencing what's there, not changing in any way kind of what God is in my life. So like you said, coming back to God, asking to come back, follow, my sponsor would tell me, go to God with a penitent heart, ask him to forgive you, which I think is true. But I also think that the work is not it's not like a transaction again, right? It's not, oh, I do this so that I get that. I do this because there isn't anything else to do. It's the only thing to do. There isn't another way to live. And that doesn't mean I don't try, but I don't try to find other ways to live, to have a secret resentment, or to have I'm the, Marty's the homicidal, homicidal in his character defects. I'm suicidal in my character defects. So I turn in and wallow and feel badly. And like I'm in a black and white movie, in the rain, smoking a cigarette. It's very tragic. And, that's where I will end up. If so I try to prove myself an exception by harboring these things, but it's never not God. It's never not going back to Him, but trying to live in those disciplines as much as I can. It's words fail me in this. I really don't know how to describe it's like, to me, it's like gravity. Like I can do everything. Like here I have my lobster, like, I'm going to pray so hard that it doesn't fall. I'm going to be such a good person so that this lobster doesn't, I'm going to get to so many meetings. I'm going to do all these things. So this, and the idea is that God is gravity. God is the underpinnings. God is everything. And so all of my resistance is only mine, and living in the obedience is like, I don't know, stopping swimming upstream, stop following. My sponsor would say this idea of, God is an umbrella walking through the rainstorm, and you can walk in the rainstorm or you can just follow along under the umbrella. Like God's not going to one of those. We don't like your answer. We're stopping the recording. No. But yeah, it's like I don't see it as transactional. I almost see it like as there isn't any other way to live. I'm not sure. I feel like words are failing me a little bit in this regard.
No, not at all. I am actually right now. Yeah, the meeting is supposed to be like an hour and 15 minutes. So, but it's okay. I'm gonna close it, and then whoever needs to stay here can ask a few more questions or go. In closing, as stated in page 29 in our big book, before I even read this, I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Really. I